In France in the 1700s, there existed a man who bore on the curse of famine so damnably well that all the food in the world wouldn't sate his unnatural hunger. This man's very visage was that of a nightmare come to life, a being so consumed by hunger that his very shape, smell, and essence reflected that of starvation. From birth to death, the man known only as Tarrare would willingly or not be the living image of famine. With thin lips pulled tight over yellowed teeth, Tarrare walked alongside the common folk of France in the 1770s. Those who saw him reported that his unnaturally thin frame sagged like worn elastic. His stomach was so ruined from use that on an empty belly he could wrap the dangling flesh around his very waist. Even at a young age, his appetite was so insatiable that his parents were forced to kick him out of their very home. Now a homeless teen living on the streets, Tarrare began touring the French provinces in the company of robbers, ladies of the night, and vagabonds, before taking up employment with a traveling charlatan. To gather crowds for the con man, Tarrare had eaten stones and live snakes. This would only be a temporary stop for the wanderer, however. In 1788, he had left the fraudster's employment and made his way to Paris, where he performed on the streets. Witnesses claimed to have watched him swallow bucketfuls of apples, corks, flints, and other objects. After one such show, he suffered an acute intestinal obstruction and had to be carried to the Hotel Dieu hospital. After being treated by the surgeon there, he offered to show off his talents by swallowing the man's watch and chain. The surgeon refused, and replied that he would cut Tarrare open to recover any valuable possessions he might have ingested. As Tarrare lived on, his appetite only grew. He joined the French military when the revolution began in 1789. Although he didn't fight, it is reported that after eating his own portions, he began bargaining with other soldiers for their food and scrapping refuse bins for leftovers. Even with the extra meals, Tarrare still found himself so near starvation that he was hospitalized. Dr. Corville and Dr. Percy began documenting and experimenting with Tarrare's unusual appetite. Dr. Percy once documented a time when Tarrare was allowed within the vicinity of 15 meals prepared for hospital staff. Tarrare quickly ate through the entire feast, consisting of 2 large meat pies and around 4 gallons of milk. Percy described his stomach as looking like an inflated and stretched out large balloon. To test the limits of his capacity, Percy and staff began introducing non-food items to Tarrare. Most infamously, Percy decided that he would present Tarrare with a live cat. The permanently famished man was witnessed by the doctor ripping the cat's abdomen open with his teeth, drinking its blood, and eating the entire cat, minus the bones, before eventually vomiting up its fur and skin. Following the so-called success of this experiment, the hospital gave Tarrare all manner of other living creatures to eat, including lizards, eels, and puppies, all of which were devoured in a similar fashion to the cat. One of the surgeons noticed Tarrare's remarkable capacity, and as a test had him eat a wooden box with a paper inside. When Tarrare successfully passed the box with the paper unharmed, doctors gave him a message in the same box with instructions to give it to captured French soldiers in Prussia. Posing as a commoner, Tarrare made it across the border but was quickly discovered to be an imposter. The Prussian army captured and tortured the man, and, according to the London Journal account, Tarrare voided the wooden case and had the address to swallow it again to conceal the knowledge of its contents from the enemy. Following the failed military spy operation that resulted in a severe beating and near lynching, Tarrare returned to Percy, begging him for assistance in finding a cure. Multiple treatments were implemented, including tobacco pills and laudanum, a potent narcotic that contained opium and morphine. Eventually, the hospital just began stuffing the man full of soft-boiled eggs, trying to quell his appetite. None of these treatment methods worked. The hospital staff was unable to keep his diet contained, and Tarrare eventually began breaking out of the hospitals to raid trash bins. He was in search of dead and decaying animals on the streets, and was also known to beg for scraps of raw meat from local butcher shops. On the rare occasions the staff could keep him contained on hospital grounds, it proved even more troublesome. Tarrare was discovered on multiple occasions drinking blood from the patients inside the hospital and eating the deceased he found in the hospital's morgue. Tarrare was eventually chased from the hospital by the hospital staff after it was suspected that he ate a 14-month-old child that had disappeared during his stay. 4 years after the incident, Percy was contacted by a hospital in Versailles who had news that a former patient of his needed assistance. It was Tarrare, who, apparently during his 4-year hiatus, hadn't had a significant change in his diet. Tarrare had told Percy he was worried he had ingested a gold fork that had become lodged in his stomach and was causing complications. Within a month, Tarrare began experiencing continuous bowel movements which would ultimately lead to his death. Dr. Percy was curious as to the internal workings of such a medical anomaly that he began work on an autopsy. It was discovered that Tarrare's esophagus was so abnormally enlarged when his jaws were open that it resembled that of a snake. This offered surgeons a view down the large canal directly into an ulcer-ridden stomach. His body was noted as being filled with pus and infection. He also appeared to have an enlarged gallbladder and liver. His cause of death was suspected to be tuberculosis. The only thing that sated Tarrare's hunger in the end was the equally endless void of death. Never has the world seen a man quite as insatiable as Tarrare since. He had truly seemed to have been chosen by famine itself. I hope you enjoyed, and if you did, please leave a like and subscribe. It'd mean a lot to me. And as always, until next time.